Welcome, everyone. I appreciate everyone taking some time today to sit in and learn, and also listen to some of the results of the early research that's been going on. Excuse me. Let's go ahead and start out with some introductions. Alyssa, please start us out.
Hi, everybody from the beautiful state of Washington. I'm Alyssa Gertler. I am Clatsop County's housing manager, and I will pass it over to Gail.
Hi, I'm not in Washington, but I can see Washington from my window, and I am the Community Development Director for Clatsop County.
Marcy.
I'm Marcy McAnally with HerbsWorks, and I'm attending because I'm helping Cannon Beach with their code rewrite and very interested in learning more today.
Thank you, Marcy. Brett.
Hi there, I'm Brett Estes. I'm the North Coast Regional Representative for the Department of Land, Conservation, and Development.
Garrett.
Hey, I'm Garrett Phillips with Columbia River Estuary Study Task Force.
Journey.
Hi, I'm Journey Gehring with 3J Consulting. And just to let you know, Steve Faust will also be joining us, but will be joining us at 2 because he's having technical difficulties.
All right, thanks for being here, Journey. Don't stop believing. that was the easy. That was an easy one. So, all right, go ahead.
Robert St. Clair, City of Cannon Beach.
I'm Jay Blake. I'm the county's planning manager. I work with Gail, and I also have a view of Washington.
John Toyoka, Clatsop County Commissioner.
Jeff Flory, City of Seaside Community Development. Steve Wright, Seaside Mayor.
Steph Condor, Related Northwest Affordable Housing Developer.
Barb Knott, Mayor of Cannon Beach.
Daniela Chansey, Related Northwest, working with the developer.
All right.
Tom Brownsland, City of Astoria City Council.
Welcome, Tom. I'm glad you were able to make it. In the back.
Rita Fackrell, Gearhart City County.
You're right, in the room. Yes.
Denise Lockman with the Columbia River Estuary City Task Force.
And all right, well, great to see you too. All right, we have 2 items on our agenda. The first item on our agenda is a review. Actually, it's a celebration of sorts. But I wanted to give the city of Seaside, we wanted to give the city of Seaside an opportunity to talk a little bit about some of the projects that they have going on and give us some updates on their status and tell us more about the exciting things that are happening here. It was my intention to try and learn the Seaside High School fight song so that I could sing it while they start and march in, but I wasn't able to get that. And the one person who graduated from Seaside High School did not remember what the school song was. So.
I also graduated.
Did you? What, do you know the school song?
Oh,
No.
yes.
No, okay. All right, now, for next week or next month, that will be part of our task, is to learn the Seaside High School fight song, so, yes.
You know that the city of Seaside has an official song?
No, I do not.
It's called Oh Seaside, Gay Seaside.
Okay,
Just letting you know if you want to sing that one.
okay, I'm gonna look it up now.
Yeah, go
The
ahead.
challenge is out there, so.
I was a librarian, I knew it all.
Okay. I want to turn it over to Jeff and the mayor to talk a little bit about all the wonderful things that are happening, and I'll let them introduce our other guests.
Yeah, so Seaside is building housing. Well, we're trying to. Right now, I'm sure you guys have heard the whole Red Lion story. It's now turned into a housing project. They are just about done, almost to a certificate of occupancy. It's going to be housing for medical workers, and a certain number of units are going to be earmarked for their clients for Clatsop Behavioral Health, and it's part of the CPCCO organization are the ones that are doing that. So it's now the Hawk's Eye Apartments is what it's going to be. So that's a win. A hotel conversion to some form of affordable housing with some workforce housing or workers housing mixed in. We'll just go right next door to it. Our last planning commission meeting, we approved a 60-unit apartment complex that's going to go on the vacant lot right there. That developer is currently finishing a housing project in Astoria. He's told me they're slated to be done in Astoria in September, and they want to start breaking ground in Seaside right away. So that could potentially push another 60 units of market rate apartment housing into our area. And the nice thing about that one, it is close to our downtown core. It's walking distance to Broadway. Further outside of town, we have a Cross Creek development. That's a subdivision, but the way that the subdivider and developer have set that up is that each apartment building, fourplex or sixplex, is on its own lot. So they have the opportunity to sell off lots with build-ready plans that have already been reviewed by our office and approved to build a sixplex or a fourplex to their design standards. And I think that one is looking to be, is that 57 units in total?
That was 70 originally.
It might be 74. I'm maybe getting that one backwards. Anyway, as you're driving through Seaside on north end of town by Dutch Brothers, you'll see they've been moving dirt for several months. They've got utilities put in, and they're getting really close to submitting for building permits on the first few buildings that'll go in. And my understanding, talking to the developer, that they have or are in the process of selling off a couple of lots to another developer that wants to build those plans there. So we might see some buildings actually going up fairly quickly at that project. Across the river from it on Wahana, we have a 40-unit project that's going in. They've kind of, I won't say slow rolled it, because it's been steadily worked on for a year and a half to 2 years now. They do have the first buildings up and leased out, so they're fully rented. Again, this is market rate housing. They started a month ago or so building the next couple of buildings on the, I guess it'd be the east side of it. They came to me a few weeks ago with the new housing bill that's been passed by the legislature in the short session. They've kind of transitioned from building a fourplex and a sixplex to building now a 12-unit building, in the hopes of the final building that goes up to be able to add maybe 2 to 4 more units based on the land use adjustment requirements that we will hopefully have a process, an application process and direction from the state on how to implement that. So they're kind of waiting on that last building to maybe be able to get a couple more units in there with the land use adjustment process. So originally 40 units, we might be able to get 42, 44 out of that. And again, that's market rate. And then we do, as the mayor mentioned prior to the meeting, the old high school, that project is moving forward. The biggest hang up on that was the city closing the deal to purchase the estuary. We have closed that deal. It's a done deal. The city owns that as a public park now. And I've met with the owner of the property, and they are very excited to get going. And it is going to be a housing focused development with trying to maximize the density that they can put on the property. And then I'll jump next door to that. The city has acquired property from the county with the stipulation that we build affordable housing on that project. There were a few hoops to jump through to get everything ready to go, to get an RFP out. We were able to finally get an RFP out, and it was reviewed by a group of folks from this room or from this committee, and it was a unanimous selection as far as the rankings go. And it was actually kind of fun to send those proposals out and get the response back. Well, I don't know how to rank these. And my answer is the same. I'm not going to put my thumb on the scale in any way. I want an honest opinion, just based on your background, your knowledge, no matter what that is. Tell me what you think, and here's the criteria, score them. And it was almost unanimous across the board, the ranking order, and related was far and above, ranked higher than any of the other proposals that we received. And I will say too, since parking is always at question with a lot of these types of large complex developments, Related's proposal, and I won't get too deep into it, but their proposal came, I think, 3 parking spaces shy of meeting our current ordinance requirements with no adjustments whatsoever. So that's, to me, that's a big win, getting almost to where our ordinance requires, with minimal adjustments are to be required and to get over hump it and actually make this happen. But with that, I'll turn it over to Steph and she can talk about their plans for the site.
Okay, great. Thank you so much, Jeff. So Seth Condor, Related Northwest, very excited about this opportunity. As a former resident and a grad of Seaside High, really understand the deep needs for housing. We have it across the state. Obviously, there's a housing emergency across the state, but what we're seeing in a lot of coastal communities are very deep housing needs. This is a fantastic opportunity to develop on a site close to my former high school. It's a little ironic.
Next time.
We'll figure it out. So, what I'd like to present to you today is our vision for the site. I'd love to get feedback, talk to you about our process, give you a little bit about our background, what I've been up to. And then maybe just open it up to comments. Does that sound okay? Okay. What you're looking at here is a rendering along Roosevelt, basically kind of showing you the vision with this 3-story walk up. We have these art panels as you're driving in from the north, which is the north entrance into the city. Folks will get the opportunity. We want to do you remember Alyssa Burke? Yeah, so she's gonna, I graduated with her and she's a local artist and Yeah, so she's a local artist and so we've commissioned her to helping us do these art panels. So we really wanted to take an aesthetic that has, the coastal vibe, if you will, but also kind of like staggering it to make it interesting and not monolithic, which sometimes you'll see. It's a little bit of a tricky site, so we worked really hard to come up with something that maximizes the density, but keeps the integrity of the neighborhood. It's a residential neighborhood to the west and to the north, and then, across the highway, it's, got a more commercial vibe. Yeah.
I just want to be clear, I'm looking at the right place. So is this where the track?
Yeah, let's go
Is-
into it. Yeah, we'll
Okay.
give you the full
you're gonna show-
up.
okay,
So we'll
great.
do our introduction, we'll go through our development team, we'll give you the concept site plan and show you where it lays out
Okay,
as it relates to the high school. Give you some insight about the unit matrix, like what kind of units we're talking about. Talk about the capital stack and the funding that we're gonna be going after, because this has to be subsidized because it is regulated affordable housing, long-term, over 60 years regulated as affordable housing. And then what our next steps are. So next slide. Okay, so who I work with is a company called Related. Related is a national developer. They're one of the largest developers in the country. They're privately owned. They've been developing for over 40 years. They started out as affordable housing developers. Nationally, they own 55,000 units of affordable housing. I don't know if anybody has ever heard of Hudson Yards, New York and Manhattan. That's Related.
Oh.
So they do very high-end, big swinging stuff. I don't do that. They do. But they did start out as affordable housing developers, and to this day, that is a core business line for them. So about 6 years ago, I had the opportunity to open an office for them in the Northwest. I actually asked them to come to Portland. I formerly worked at Central City Concern, which is a nonprofit affordable housing. And so did Daniela, that's how we met. And we did a lot of housing for homeless and deeply affordable housing and addiction and recovery services. So kind of a different affordable housing, all under the affordable sphere though. But I really felt that we needed somebody sophisticated like Related to come into our market to be able to develop across the balance of the state. Central City Concern really stays in Portland. They're a fantastic organization, but my vision is I really wanted to be able to do more and address some of the things. So we're able to partner with a lot of different jurisdictions, housing authorities, nonprofits, and do a really wide spectrum of different types of affordable housing. So we develop senior affordable housing, workforce affordable housing, family affordable housing. I do permanent supportive housing, intergenerational. There's all different types. And so, like I said, local Oregon roots, do a lot of private public partnerships. We work with a lot of different types of regulatory requirements like MWESB participation or COVID certified, which is like minority or women-owned firms. We have a lot of experience with that. Next slide. These are some of the projects that we have developed. So the one in the top, Daniela and I did together. That's our first child, right? There you go.
So beautiful.
Yeah, we love that. It's in the St. John's neighborhood, 110 units of family housing. Cedar Commons, they're down below, with 60 units, turnkey for Central City Concern with permanent supportive housing. Crescent Court, 138 units of family housing, partnering with Central City Concern and Boys and Girls Club. And then up there in the corner, that's in Tigard across from Washington Square Mall, 144 units, family housing, actually an intergenerational component. So some 4 bedrooms, 3 bedrooms, and working with Engaged that does a big arts, senior and youth programming, which is really cool. Next slide. Then we've got a lot more, but I thought that gives you a little flavor of what. Now those have a more urban like context, right? They're in a city and so they have a different aesthetic. What we're proposing here is a more residential aesthetic. And so that's why you're not going to see that same scale, the same magnitude, height and things like that, and some of the materiality. In the urban context, you're doing brick and metal and, you know, this, you know, kind of cladding that's a little more urban. We're looking at durable materials, which we'll get into, but still have like a homier feel. So this is a little bit of like the organizational structure. Related is the lead developer, and then we basically hire all of these folks to help collaborate and deliver you, the city of Seaside, a great building. So we're working with Essex Construction, Clatsop Community Action for Resident Services. We are working with Quantum Residential for property management, Incrum Moisen for architecture. We will be doing the community outreach and engagement alongside community action. So we always participate in any community outreach. We're very hands-on. We always work with a third-party construction manager. They're located out of Bend, but they focus solely on affordable housing up and down the West Coast. And I've worked with them for a decade and they know exactly what I need and want, and that works out good. And we would like to plan for an after-school program that's called Art Room, that's based out of Astoria, that I've been very impressed with. And, you know, I was very into art, still am, but as a kid, art and sports, that's what kept me going in Seaside. And so we want to make sure that it's accessible to all children of all income levels. So next slide. This is who is on this team. So who's not here today is Bill Woody and Ann Silverberg. Bill is the founder of Related California. He is all around the world at all times. You won't be seeing much of him. He'll probably come for the grand opening if we can get him here. Ann Silverberg is my direct boss. She's out of San Francisco office. She's a fantastic woman and she will, you know, be coming in and out here and there. And then there's just Daniela and I. We are going to be the ones developing for you, doing the hard work. You know, I have a staff of, there's 7 of us, and certain projects that are, you know, high touch or near and dear to my heart, I actually do them myself. And so this one I will be doing myself because obviously this means a lot to me to have this opportunity and I want to make sure it's perfect. And all of my team is fantastic, but this one's near and dear. So, and Danielle and I have worked on a number of near and dear projects, so you're gonna get the best. Okay, next slide. So this is our Essex team, Incrum Moisen and GLI. Incrum Moisen, I think, has developed, even when I was at CCC, I worked with them. They know our standards and specs, our design. Related has very high design criteria, and they've done a number of projects for us, so they know what to expect. Usually I give them the program for the project. Our standards and specs is the whole book of like, this is what our sinks have to be, this is what our cabinetry has to be. We're very prescriptive about everything. And then we talk about the basic of design. So they know the drill. They do a fantastic job in housing. They've won multiple awards. They're based out of Portland and we get excellent customer service and they're wonderful to work with. So not only do they do a very good design, but they're very technical in details, which will keep us from cost overruns and also be gentle on the city of Seaside, and doing a good job and delivering plans that are worth looking at, so. Okay, next slide. Art room programming, we came across them. We'd actually first tried to do a project in Astoria that we didn't get selected for, but we kept the art room because we were really impressed with their programming. And we thought that it would be really important to do something that really energized and kind of connected the youth and also helped out mom and dad when they're working for after school. Now, we do realize that the Sunset Parks and Rec has opportunities too. And we will be connecting with them, but we do like to do stuff on site because a lot of the times there's transportation barriers for the children. So being able to get off the bus and go to their program, and then mom and dad can just come home and get them right there and get them to their house. Next slide. And, you know, Viviana, what can I say? She is a force to be reckoned with around here. Really impressed by her passion for housing and just deep services for the community. She's very connected with a lot of other organizations, so we think that they will be key. They do provide a lot of resident services on other affordable housing communities. So we think that that will be a good synergy to connect with food stability and benefit attainment and anything else that the residents need to be able to keep them stabilized. So the proposed concept is called the Pacifica, and anybody that is connected with Seaside High School might know what I'm pointing to. So this is my Pacifica project. It's a little late.
Is that like your senior project you're supposed to have done?
But you know, I kind of did. So, but this is gonna be done a lot better. So, so this is, you know, what we're looking at. Maybe if we can go to the next slide, because I think context wise, yeah. So this is an aerial of how the site fits. To the south of this project is where the track is. So this is over where the baseball diamond is, that abuts up to that industrial, what is that, a fueling station or something? Yeah.
It was a gas station, it's way upper right.
Okay. Yeah, so, you know, we thought, you know, because to the north of this is that light industrial use, putting the parking right there was the right thing to do, not putting the housing right up against that. Creating kind of a barrier with the housing to the, you know, to Roosevelt there. Showing a good landscaping buffer, but also access to the walkway there. And then we want to use the same lights that, you know, that are all over Seaside to kind of continue with the theme of the lighting, because you know how you extended it down Holiday, it looks really good. And so thought about that. We kept it at 3 stories. We have a 45-foot height. You know, we're going to be developing this under SBA. So this site is actually a light industrial use site, but under the governor's SBA, you can develop it for affordable housing. So we're working with a land use consultant to help us navigate that process. The height requirement, you could get to 45 feet. We're doing 3-story walk-ups and not a 4-story elevator served. Normally, when you go to 4 stories, you want to have an elevator served. We did that for a few reasons. Cost controls, number 1. Number 2, kind of mimicking the height and the neighborhood. You don't see 4 stories a lot at this end of town, and we thought that it didn't make a lot of sense. We also had to, you know, it's always like a Rubik's Cube or Tetris or one of those things, 80s and 90s, whatever reference, of making sure that you're hitting the parking count with the density. So if you go up to 4 stories, you wouldn't be able to park it the right way. And I know that this community is very auto dependent. I mean, just is. It's walkable, which is great, but a lot of people might work in Warrenton or Astoria or Cannon Beach. And so, you know, being mindful of the need for having parking is really important, and also not overburdening the neighborhood. That's the last thing we want. So in this rendering, you see kind of like 5 pods. We'll say 2 of them are connected in a way, but it's not like they're open to each other. We're just doing that to make it kind of an interesting design, but also you're saving money on the skin of the building by connecting in this way. And then we also looked at, we really want like a community center with our property management space, our after-school space, and a community center. And that is gonna be over on Holiday, and that is really like a 1-story or maybe like a 1.5-story, kind of with a shed roof with some interesting lighting coming in, connected to a tot lot. And as many of you may know, but maybe not all, I'm gonna assume, the future plans for the parks out here is gonna be a really great amenity for this, so, and the opportunity to attend one of those meetings and hear about the plans and what the thought process is. So, we have a very small playground space. There isn't a ton of, maybe go to the next slide. You can look at, here's the community building a little up front, like an overhead. We know that, inclement weather and rain and things, so having an outdoor space to enjoy the outdoors, but maybe not be in the rain. You can see the way the units lay out. Of course, I'd have to put my readers on there to see all that says, but, let's see here. So you can see we've got 2s that are, Daniela, what does the square footage say? I can't see.
884.
Okay, so 884, which is a very good size 2-bedroom. I did, in these secondary, what we would call kind of secondary communities or bedroom communities, you want bigger units, you find, in a downtown urban context, that might be 700 square feet downtown Portland. And a 1-bedroom at 624 and a studio at 416, and the 3s are at, what does that say, Dee?
1350.
Yeah, that's a good one. We don't.
There's also a glare, so.
Yeah, thank you for being kind. So, we imagine, so we have 2 concepts. One is 57 units and another one could be 65 units. And with the 65 units, this community building that you see here would get, I think, 2 stories on top of it with housing on top of the community center. So that's a way, if we decide that that's what the city really wants. And we have to also consider the financial feasibility, because I have to go after public dollars and it's competitive. And so we look at like, can this still hit the winning numbers? But we think they can, so that's up for discussion. But under the 57 unit scheme, you can see 6 3-2s, 24 2s, 15 1s, and 12 studios. And the reason that we kind of spread this out, because we think that there's a lot of different needs in household types. This could serve seniors, new parents, single parents, larger families. So we were trying to like hit as much as we can a broad spectrum of housing. I think that's really important. The affordability will be no greater than 60% area median income and to as low as 30%. We will be trying to pursue some project-based vouchers for a few 30% units. We just had lunch with Andy Shaw, who worked at Central City Concern with Daniela and I, who is now the Housing Authority's director there. So we don't claim we have it in, but we do know him. And we had a great conversation and he's very supportive of this project. So we're excited about that. What else can I say about this design? It's an efficient design. I really took into consideration of the cost per square foot, and because rents are low, the cost to build this is about what the same amount is to build in Portland, but the rents are much higher. So when you look at that, your subsidy is going to be greater. The cost is about the same. You've got less rent supporting it, so it's going to require more subsidy. So when I develop these, I'm always thinking like, okay, is this financially feasible? Are we going to be able to get funded on this? I'm backing into how do we get it funded? Next slide.
The other thing you want to add is that the 2 homes on the property, so we wanted to make sure that the 3-story buildings gave space and privacy to both of those homes.
Yeah,
Because
there are 2 single-family residents adjacent to this.
Oh, okay.
So we talked about the after-school program, we talked about resident services, property management. We work with Quantum, which is based out of Vancouver. They've done all of our property management. Prior to being a real estate developer, I actually worked in property management. It's something I spend weekly with Daniela on calls to ensure that we're operating really well, that the project is financially solvent, that the resident, the atmosphere is good, and that it's clean. It's like my really basic, I walk onto the property, it better be clean, I don't use my marbles, so.
Do you have an on-site manager?
We will have on-site manager, so we'll have a community manager and some kind of maintenance tech person is what we put in for this. And we have like a separate leasing area, property management space. We'll also have like a resident service office for residents to come in. They may have a complaint about the property manager and they go to resident services or vice versa. So we try to make those spaces very distinct. But I do feel that Quantum does a very good job of professionalism and also integrity with the residents and being kind. There's a big spectrum out there of the way property management behaves, and I feel like Quantum does a really good job of treating people thoughtfully and as a client, you know? So that's a very important attribute. We are gonna do a community room that can be used for like Rotary meetings, you know, all different types of things. We encourage that. It first and foremost has to serve the residents of that building because that's how you get it into tax credit basis and get it paid for. But secondarily, we don't rent it out. It's not for money or anything like that, but it can be used for public space to hold meetings on all different types of programming. And doing a tot lot and walking path into the North 40 Park. So we, and an outdoor barbecue area, did a lot of thinking about our landscape architect. I love him very much. I'm working with him on a lot of things. I have not said this in a long time about our landscape architect. I've been like, but I think I found a good one. And he does a good job with balancing cost efficiency and listening to what we want and durability, because what we tend to see in affordable housing communities is a higher wear and tear.
Yeah.
And so you have to be really intelligent about like, you know, your lighting, your landscaping, you know, I'm like, you can't have small boulders that children are gonna throw. You can't have that in there. Like, what do you know? So you have to think about all these different things. And I've been in affordable housing for over 15 years now and seen a lot of things that work and don't work. So this is kind of just practice, and you know, each one we learn something new.
And secured access.
Secured access, we do a lot with crime prevention through environmental design. So really thinking about where are the dark areas on the property, how to light them. We have, we'll have fob accesses. So, you know, you have an entrance into there. It's a door that's fobbed to get up into the units. We have security cameras around and lighting all around. We really do a lot about making sure that it's safe, sanitary, you know, housing that is very livable. We have an in-house architect also that reviews the design besides Ankrum that has been with Related for 30 years, that is a stickler for living closets, pantries, natural light, closets that actually fit a hanger,
Yeah.
you know, things that sometimes you're like, how did this happen?
Everything you want in your home.
Yeah.
You make sure.
Yeah, he's very meticulous and he goes through and makes sure that, you know, that furniture will fit in the unit and how it will lay out and does like all that review. He can be a worst nightmare to an architect or their best friend if they cooperate and come along willingly. So next slide. So here is some of the renderings. You know, this is a very rough concept. We, you know, to try to get through the RFP process, we try to produce something that gives you a vision, but we work to do more community engagement, work with the city also to incorporate their vision and their feedback. So this is a best guess, what we think we know. We will, like this cladding, this isn't wood, it looks like wood. It's fiber cementitious board. All of our fasteners, our nails and things are gonna be stainless steel. We're gonna really think about like the climate that we have here to make sure that we don't have rusted out things. My mom lives 2 blocks away. I will be continuing to visit here. And I want it to look good when I come by and make sure that everybody's feeling good about it. So there will be a lot of thoughtfulness around the materials to make sure that it's well conceived. Next, where are we going? Okay. So a little bit of data for you. So these are the rents based on, I think this is Clatsop County's HUD AMI level rent. So this is the range of rents. So at the low end for a 60% studio, so 60% of area median income based on HUD's, you know, numbers that they do annually is $970, all the way up to $1,440 for a 3-bedroom. And you can get this, on OHCS's Oregon Housing and Community Services website, has them for all the counties. So, the 30% rents are anywhere from 485 up to 720, and 30% usually are individuals that are on disability or social security, very, very low income. We will be seeking to go after project-based vouchers to further support them and help with the affordability on that. But in general, this is predominantly serving 60% AMI residents. So this is a workforce housing community.
Can I add to the story just a little bit?
Yeah.
When I arrived here, I was greeted by a very nice person in the front office. And she said, "What do you do? What does this group do?" When I talked about housing, and she said, "I make $2,200 a month. And my monthly rent for a 2-bedroom apartment is $1,600. So she's paying $1,600 a month, but she makes $2,200 a month. And so this is a type of place where she might fit in.
Right.
And a wonderful part of the community, working at the community center, making a fair salary. I don't know if that's
Yeah.
fair or not, but this may be another opportunity for her.
Yeah, and one of the things that we had written up in the RFP that we're interested in exploring with, support, obviously, is looking at doing a preference for housing for city employees and school district employees.
Yeah.
Because, and speaking with Jason Floyd, which was weird.
This is old home week for you.
Babysit my brother, I don't know. I went to school when Caleb, right, so anyways, funny. So anyways, where was I going there? He was saying they were having a hard time attracting teachers to the coast because there's no housing opportunities. So and I talked to the superintendent as well. So trying to do a play with that, we can do things like that within fair housing. As long as it's open, right, and it's not for a gender or race-based or religious-based, as long as it's open to a pool of working individuals, then it's open.
Steph, if I may, we've had some conversations about this, and it's not just city of Seaside.
Right, yeah.
We've talked at length about this needs to be a project that benefits the entire county.
Yeah.
The county was a big part in making this happen. Alyssa's been a big part in making this happen. Jay's been here helping. This whole group has talked about something like this since the inception of it.
Yeah.
And with Mr. Adams, who's no longer a community development director in our state, he was very clear with some of his analysis that many employees from Cannon Beach and other parts of Clatsop County have to commute in, and logically, a Cannon Beach employee could potentially thrive in a facility, a housing situation like this, because it's close enough to get them to work.
And I agree. I mean, Cannon Beach, Seaside, Gerhart, Astoria, it's all kind of.
The only thing we're missing is the light rail. From Astoria all the way down to Canada Beach.
I think that a very big point to say that between Astoria and Cannon Beach, we have like 25 miles. I guess we would be like Lincoln City used to be.
Yeah, that's true.
Same kind of thing.
Yeah.
We all work together. We have people that live and work in all of our communities. And, it doesn't take very long to get between them all. So anything we can do, provide housing for one of us, is gonna help somebody else.
Yeah.
We just need to work on like transit to be able to, for those, and there's many more nowadays that don't have cars. So, it's very simple to walk from there into downtown. I walk from my house in South Seaside to here today, 25 minutes.
Well, and that's what's nice about Seaside is it is so walkable with Holiday. You can go all the way, to downtown.
And it's flat.
It's flat. It's fantastic. So, it's a great opportunity.
And the census data also, to corroborate what you said, stated that I think it was 27 minutes for someone that was commuting into Seaside, and that was the daily, was the average.
So these, I think we found the median household income for the area. I don't know what the range is.
The next slide shows.
Oh, okay. Yeah. And so this, you know, for over 40% of folks in this area work in retail, entertainment, arts, recreation, food services, which is different, right? From when I was growing up, which was, you know, fishing, timber.
Right.
You know, so it's changed a lot, and those are sometimes lower income jobs.
Yeah.
Frankly. So, you know, this is what the actual median income is in the area. So for we'll say a 2-person household at 60%, that's 44,000. Right? So we could look at doing some 50% units. It's really a function of funding and subsidy, and then the city of Seaside's desires. I don't want to do anything you don't want, so you tell me. And as long as I can get it funded, and, you know, the nice lady that was on the screen, Ann Silverberg, says it's okay. Okay, next slide. Okay, so schedule. So one thing that happened more recently, when we first put out our schedule, it was based on the assumption that the funding round would be like last year's funding round and the year before that's funding round. But the state's having I think, some challenges getting their QAP, basically the 4% program, written out. So they pushed it out. Normally it would be out like this month in September coming up, and you would get awarded by December. But they pushed it out until like maybe January, February, the application comes out, and it probably doesn't get awarded until May. So we are very kind of tied to that to some extent. So we updated this to kind of show you, here's the new world. We are kicking off our schematic design. So we've gone through concept. We'll talk about next steps of what we need to do from an entitlement perspective, from a, you know, a city planning perspective, and to go through like what our concept, you know, is it physically feasible? You know, does fire life safety sign off on it? What does, you know, engineering say? All of those things. So then we'll get into our schematic design, which is where we really kind of get a little more granular about how the units are laying out, what's in the units, how the kitchens sit, you know, how we stack our mechanical, electrical, and plumbing in the building. Get much more finite, do an updated pricing with our general contractor. And, you know, we are planning on getting into an exclusive negotiating agreement, which the draft is coming in. I put comments back on it, need it back. So, but it's on its way. And then in February, we hope it comes out by February, hopefully January, we will put in for our 4% low-income housing tax credits and list subsidy, which would basically be fully funded. And we also would like to put it in for 9%. We just want to make sure that we throw all the spaghetti at the wall, like whatever the funding comes out, it really doesn't make a difference. The deal works with either funding source. So the way the capital stack works is you have like a soft debt loan from the state, which is your subsidy, and you have these tax credits that generate low-income housing tax credit equity. And then you have conventional debt, which is backed by tax exempt bonds. And then you have like maybe some grants in there and a deferred developer fee, and that's it. That's how the sausage is made. And so that funding at this point all comes through the state. Now, we will work with anybody in the room that has funding that wants to participate, because it's very important to try to put money into this deal locally. A, to show support, and B, to try to bring the most competitive project out there, because we're competing against all the other rural projects out there, and there are going to be a lot. Because a lot of cities are doing what the city of Seaside is doing now. They're putting in land, they're putting in money, they're waiving SDCs, they're doing property tax exemptions. They put all these things because they want to leverage their resources for the state resources. And the state resources honestly will make up probably 75% of the funding for the deal. 25% will be just the debt, which is supported by the rent in the project. So just to let you know, that's like how, when you have that reduced rent, it really only supports about 25% of the project as a result, some depending on the rent and the unit mix, but it's usually about 25 to 30%. Okay, keep going. So we think that we would submit for, so there's two things. If we were to get pre-development money to help us with covering for the cost of design, then we could push up our, so you go to SD, you go to design development and then to CD. So normally what we do is we do our initial design, the little bit, get in for our funding app, put our pen down and wait to get funded. And then once we're funded, we would do the rest of the design. If we had pre-development money, then like, which could be anywhere, usually pre-development, I will spend $1 million to $1.5 million. Even if we got like $500,000, then I could probably convince Related to spend the rest of it and get us all through our design to get our permits in earlier. So this could move up probably by 4 or 5 months quicker. So it's really just if there is proceeds out there. And we can look at the state if they have pre-dev money. It's very competitive and it usually goes to the nonprofit space. We're not a nonprofit, we're a for-profit. We partner with a nonprofit in every deal. So sometimes we can get that nonprofit to go and get the funding for us.
Steph, I don't know if you're able to touch on your guys' estimated cost to build this out.
28,
Was it?
Yeah.
Okay,
close to 29.
okay. Is that hard cost or total? Total. Yeah, so total cost. So let's talk about that. So 28 to 29 million, it includes the cost to construct it, the construction interest that you have to pay because you have a construction loan on it. It covers for all the permit fees, all the design and architect and engineering fees, all our consultant fees. It covers for, because you take tax credits, you get fees from the state that are large, like they have bond fees and drawdown fees and tax credit fees, all of those things. It also helps cover the marketing and lease up while you're leasing the project because that's part of your development budget. And any environmental due diligence, geotechnical due diligence. What else am I missing? Oh, operating reserves. The bank will
Would
require.
you estimate, and maybe this is a question for the city, this is the largest project for housing that's been done in Seaside, as far as a single project?
Well, I mean, in the long time, I mean, Sand Hill's pretty big,
Okay,
right?
Yeah,
Right, but that's been around since before I was around. That's a 70s vintage.
Yeah.
It's still in good shape, by the way,
Yeah.
you know, for what it is.
I guess, as far as I've seen, this is gonna be the biggest housing project.
yeah, I'm thinking
But,
28 to 29
I
million
mean,
in a
it's
housing project.
significant- It's a significant cost
Yeah.
to get something like this off the ground.
Yeah.
And it's not, the cost can be borne just by one.
Right.
And
Yeah.
And we tried to be scrappy. You know, what we're seeing with inflation and costs per doors, at least in the city, it's around 500 to 625,000 per unit to develop.
They'll work out to a square footage cost.
Hey, it's okay, you were art and sports, man. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to distract you.
Amazing as
But
well.
I'm so impressed, I just had to throw something on there.
Yeah, you're right, it's true. What we are seeing, I can't tell you on this, I can look it up, and get back to you, because I don't have that readily at hand, available. This is coming in a lot lower than my stuff in the urban area, because we are doing a walk-up, meaning not an elevator served. So I don't have, the cost efficiencies is when you have an elevator served, you have an interior corridor hall that I'm paying for, which I'm conditioned space, which means it's got, well, some people do lid like this, but I do a hard lid. So you're paying for all of that, the walls, the hard lid, all of the gear, right? Your elevator, that's 200,000. It's like, I think 30,000 a stop. It's 125 for just the elevator shaft and all of that. So all of that stuff adds up. So this is why I designed it this way, so we can have cost efficiency. What we're seeing is anywhere from about 285 a square foot up to 400 a square foot. Now, what I always say is, what's behind the square foot? Because imagine if you're doing a single room occupancy, which is even smaller than a studio, it has just a bathroom in it and a little tiny room that might be 300 square feet, 250 square feet. That's like for homeless housing. that actually per square foot is much more expensive than a 3-bedroom. Because what's in that square foot, there's a toilet every 10 square feet, you know what I mean?
It's like a contractor, if you do a kitchen versus a living room.
Yeah,
You know,
totally.
you do a kitchen, you've done it all.
Yeah.
Living room, you put up some walls.
That's right. So I'm always
Paint.
like, square foot is really a good indicator, but I always say, what's behind the square foot? What are you, yeah.
Yeah, I guess the reason I was sort of thinking about the question was, you said that rent covers what percentage, right, of the,
It's anywhere, well, it depends on your affordability.
Yeah.
Right? So it's anywhere, it could be 25 up to 30 to 40%, just depending on how much the deal,
yeah,
the debt service can cover. Also, what we're seeing is because interest rates have gone up,
yeah,
we can serve so much less debt, meaning I can't take out as big a mortgage anymore. And also my interest reserve, where I used to have to maybe have like a interest reserve for a 20-month project of 900,000, it's like 2.5 million now. Just for the interest for construction. So it's been very hard to operate in this environment. What I've appreciated about Related is the conservatism. So when I underwrite these deals and do the financials, I'm very conservative to weather these types of storms. There was an Oregonian article that came out last week that was about like all of the affordable housing projects in Portland are underwater, meaning they can't hit their debt service right now. That's not Related situation. And because we're very conservative in how we underwrite, meaning my debt service coverage ratio, where the city might try to push a developer into going to a 1.15, I'm like, I'm not doing it. I will underwrite to a 1.25, because that 2.25 is the cushion, you know? So we really look at the financial feasibility and for the long term, because Related, we are a long-term owner. We're not here to sell. So we plan to own this for the very long term. And we want to make sure that it can operate for a long time. With the tax credits, you can't refinance that deal for 15 years. So for 15 years, you're basically locked out. Well, in your perm loan, it's usually a 10-year lockout, and there's an early exit of your tax credit investment. I'm going way too deep. But usually it's about 15 years. Okay, so usually it's about 15 years. So you have to make sure that that asset is built like a brick blank house, because you can't do anything to it really. You can't recapitalize the deal. You have an operating reserve that covers operations if there's a shortfall, and you have a replacement reserve that you're putting to every year. And that's for small deferred maintenance, not huge capital improvements. So you really want to make sure, and especially on the coast, when you're building, you got to make sure that it's built really, really well, that it can withstand 15 years of wear and tear. So like the cladding that we use with the fiber cementitious board, and just like the windows where, you know, we have certain window brands that we're like, okay, VPI is really good, they're good customer service, their warranty is good. So we really have honed down what we think is thoughtful. So it's balancing like the finishes, you want to be very durable and have, you know, strength, but you also have to have the cost efficiencies to be able to build it, right? So it's always that juxtaposition. Also, there will be at the state funding requirements for NWESB participation. So the general contractor will try very, very hard to work with a sub pool that is either a minority or woman-owned contractor, which can be very challenging in coastal communities and rural communities and central Oregon communities where there may not be a representation. So threading that needle, trying to find those folks. So we went on I could talk about this for days. I did. Yeah.
I had, I'm gonna speak out of turn for City of Cannon Beach just a little bit, but they do have a housing funding reserve that they've set that program up to where they can provide funding not only in Cannon Beach, because they recognize the commute and stuff, and so I just wanted, you might reach out to them.
That's good to know. Thank you. Yeah, I mean, everything helps.
No, they haven't spent any yet.
Have you two met? I'm just saying.
But June's my teacher. A long time ago. Not art or sports.
Okay, all right.
That class I met. I forgot it all. So, yeah. Okay, next.
On your timeline, one thing to consider would be that June 1st that's a, implementation, pre-implementation of that FEMA buyout.
Well, you got my antenna up when we were talking. I actually probably am gonna reach out and pick your brain more, because we really need to think about that, like strategically, of like, how to get this.
Because they, worst case scenario, if they get what they want, your pre-development costs could be quite different.
Yeah, it sounds like, well, I mean, if I can't get insured loan, I don't know how that would work,
Yeah,
so.
or flood insurance, whatever,
Yeah.
your insurance rates could go, or whatever,
Yeah, I really think, having some political discussions, like at the governor, like, because, we got to meet with Amy, which is the first lady, that came out to the site and talked to her. She's very supportive of the development. And I wonder if she knows about this. And I know that the governor is very, involved in land use for the CHIPS Act and all of these, and housing and SBA. This would be something that would impact a lot of coastal communities. I think they need to pay attention, because it's gonna kill a lot of deals.
I think next month, we'll, again, as we talked earlier, that's gonna be one of the major topics here, is what are the potential impacts of this result, or this issue on housing production and that future. So that will be officially on the agenda, and I know Gail's gonna put together a presentation on.
So there's a.
Brett was at the meeting we had with our regional solutions
Yeah.
team.
Yeah, and I would say the governor is very aware of all the BIOP issues. I can't speak for the governor's office. But that is something I know that that the governor is being briefed upon, and all the regional solutions coordinators, as Mayor's Wright was talking about, that Nate Stice, who is our regional solutions coordinator for the North Coast, is hearing concerns from all the different jurisdictions, and is feeding that back to the governor's office. So I'm let you know that at least she is very aware of those concerns.
Yeah, and I don't know, I was just texting with a friend of some developer friends, and they're on this, with this nonprofit organization called Oregon Smart Growth. I'm not affiliated with it. I don't go to the meetings, not speaking for them, but I know that they're very pro-development, and pro-build. So that might be an organization to go to get funding support for some of your, like, working with the Eco Northwest to help build your case, or whoever those, consultants could be. I don't know. I just know that they've done a lot of things for helping, keeping production going. Participating in that kind of stuff. I'm a developer that doesn't like cutting trees down. It's a very hard life for me. So, okay, this is the capital stack I was talking about. So we have some different options. There's this, what's called ORCA. I don't know what the acronym stands for, but it's basically like a subsidy only in debt. So you wouldn't be using tax credits. This deal kind of barely works within that program. We'd have to do some massaging, and look at that, but that could be an opportunity and could go in soon. The 4% lift works all day long. It looks great. The 9% is gonna be paired with lift, I think, this year, or home dollars, so it looks really good. The difference between a 4% and 9% is, it'd be a long conversation, so I'll keep it brief. The 9% is usually for smaller projects, usually around 50 units is the sweet spot. You get more equity in the deal, but it has a cap of 2 million. So as your project gets bigger, you're not gonna get as much equity, so you go to the 4%. This feels like right in between, where it works in both. And all I care about is just getting it funded as soon as possible. That's the name of the game. So that's what we're trying to gear it up for, and I obviously want it to be what you all want and but execution is gonna be critical, and funding drives all that.
So I was gonna take the smart aleck response, say, well, I know you math isn't your strong, but.
Yeah. I've come a long way. I did, yeah, I ended up, yeah. I've come a long way.
This one is usually pretty nice. Keep going, I'm sorry.
Okay, so, you know, Related, what's great about Related is we're a national developer that has access to a lot of different capital resources. When I talk about that capital, I'm talking about investors and lenders, because that's a component of that. So we have a great pool to work with. And I've already pre-called about like, will you invest here? It's in a tsunami zone, you know, blah, 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 blah. They're like, yes. I'm like, okay, now this FEMA thing puts a new spin on it, so I do need to dig into that. Okay, we'll get there. So local, we'll look for local resources where we can. I know that it's limited, but whatever we can cultivate to bring the most competitive deal will be important. And then we always try to get grants, like solar grants through PG&E, because we'd love to put a solar array on this. And I think we've gotten solar on almost every single project we have.
Solar, the only one we don't have is PSH, but that's because we have Verizon on the building. We don't have
Right,
it
on the
family.
top.
Yeah.
And we don't on Alder because it's a small footprint.
Yes,
Yeah.
and so is PSH. Beacon's small.
Like normally, we're able to leverage PGE solar grants and do a full solar array, which it's not to benefit the residents. It does inadvertently. It basically takes like the load off of the house load, we call it, like the perimeter, the lighting in the hallways, the lighting in the community center, all of that use. Which frees up the availability to put more resources on programming and resident services. So inadvertently it does, but it doesn't reduce their electricity bill.
But most individuals who would live in the affordable housing are able to access reduced.
Yeah,
lower cost.
yeah. And we cover water, sewer, garbage, and the hot water. For the hot water.
And Clatsop Community Action works with residents to access that.
And there will be washer and dryers, I think, in the threes.
In the 3 bedrooms, yes, and then
And then there's like a laundry
room in the first.
Yeah, so that's kind of our standard there. Okay, next slide. I don't remember. Okay, so next steps, execute the exclusive negotiating agreement with the city of Seaside. We want to understand more about the entitlement process and get through that process. We need to get an early design meeting to sit down to vet our concept, to make sure that it's going to, that's how we're gonna be able to progress the design, because we don't wanna put chasing after a design that isn't going to pass, like fire life safety or any of those things. We're gonna do environmental due diligence. There's already been a great deal done, but we kind of go in and do our additional. We'll complete a land survey. We'll do geotechnical due diligence. So once we get through that early design meeting and we pin down where the building's gonna be, then we go in and do some test pits to look at, you know, what type of foundation systems. This is probably in a liquefaction zone, so we'll probably do geopiers or something, or mat slab, a little more rigidity there, more fortified. And then we'll talk about with the city on how we want to do community outreach and all of that and coordinate that. So that's probably the next 3 months. It's gonna be a lot. It goes very fast for us. Because we want to get absolutely ready for that funding round. Because the number we put out there is the number we put out there. So we need to really be sure of like, can we build it for this amount? Have we really discovered all of the secret things to this soil that, you know, because that's where you really get, you know. Next slide, I think that's it. Oh, golly. Okay, well, you could look at that another time. Any other questions or thoughts, or I don't know if we went over time,
We went a little bit over time, but I'm really happy to learn of all the work that you guys have done on the project. And again, kudos to your group, the city of Seaside, and all the people who have helped put this together, because it's gonna take a number of these to get us going in the right direction. So it's positive.
Yeah.
It really is.
Yeah.
So
I can speak for the crowd. I think we'd rather hear and listen to you than Jay.
My jokes are old and dusty. I always go with the classics.
I'll be real happy to get rid of the term north 40.
Oh, yeah. It's really weird. I didn't realize, but we would always say the back 40. Now I know that's a term that
Back
people,
40, yeah.
but like every house that I've lived in, I've always referenced the back 40. And I
Oh,
think
yeah.
it's because they called this the north 40 and I didn't make the
Oh.
connection. So when I saw this, I was like, maybe that's why I do that.
Yeah.
Oh.
Well, the north 40 is the park area.
Yeah.
And it's kind of always been called that. I
Yeah.
guess.
Yeah.
And so, I just came up with north of the North Fork.
That's what people
Well,
say, it's the land
Pacifica.
north of the North Fork.
Yeah.
It's all in the place.
We're not stuttering, we're just describing where it is. All right. Are there any questions from online? All right, well, again, I really wanted to say thanks to your group and the city of Seaside for shepherding this project forward, and hopefully it continues to work.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I think this FEMA thing is something we need to really.
We do need to talk about that, yes.
Really.
So I just have one,
Yeah, go ahead.
having not too long ago gone through this
Yeah,
sort of scenario, it was a lot more tender, it was Heritage Square in Astoria.
yeah.
And some of the challenges here, and the two components that were troublesome. One was, what was the city into it for? You know, is what the city is offering you now going to be enough once you get to that actual bottom line? And because it turned out it wasn't. You know, we went into it with a certain concept of what we were willing to give up and whatnot, and when the final ask came, it was for much more. And between that, because we also had to take into consideration the whole tax break incentive
Right.
portion of it too, and how was that gonna impact, and how long was that gonna last, and was that also worth it to the city
Yeah.
for this particular project? And then finally, is the community behind it?
Mhm.
You know, is this a sort of a development that anybody has their feelers out going, that, you know, are there people out there that don't like the idea of affordable housing in this spot in Seaside at all? You know, and how is that going to impact, and if there's a feel for that? So those were the landmines that ultimately came back to
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
stop
I followed
the
it
development.
closely.
And the developer had Edlin went a long way down the road before they got there, and put in a lot of time and energy and their money
Yeah.
to get to that point, and see it all just kind of collapse.
Yeah,
I would hate to see that.
right. We pursued that project as well. We weren't selected, but that was a very difficult to develop site with the topography and the sidewalks and the shoring and the pit. It was, and what the city of Astoria was asking for, a lot of like commercial ground floor activation space, and you know, a lot of the times everybody wants all these things and they say, geez, why does it cost so much to develop? And it's like, what? Oh, you know, and so this one's a bit simpler in the sense that we don't, yeah. And with the subsidies, because there are thresholds to the subsidies, it's not just a free for all. They're like, you get this much for one, that's at 60%, you get this much for a two at 60%. So there's a whole chart grid of affordability and unit mix. This one pencils pretty well. We will ask for property tax exemption, which from my perspective is like the bare minimum to ask a jurisdiction for. That is the standard in affordable housing in any market that we work in. We're working, you know, we worked in Tigard, Portland, we're doing a ton of stuff in Milwaukee, we're doing stuff in
So
Tacoma.
you ask for an exemption or
Property
reduction?
tax exemption, yes.
So no property tax.
No property tax. And that, what the city needs to understand is every project that's going in and competing, that's kind of the bare minimum. Usually they're waiving all the system development charges, they're putting money in, they're giving land. So when we put forth a deal, just know, if you want to get it funded, you also have to be competitive, right? Because if the city isn't waiving property tax exemption, that just means less debt that it can serve because you have less income on the deal. That means you need more subsidy. So if building X in this city is giving a property tax exemption and asking for 4 million, and building B in this city isn't giving a property tax exemption and asking for 5 million, now you don't have a deal. And that's what happens. And so that's why it's upon us to educate the city, and you have to be comfortable with it. It's also what, you know, your constituents are comfortable with. But I mean, that's the reality of what's going on out in
Well,
the
so-
space.
I don't want to spend.
I'm gonna give you 30 seconds.
30 seconds. So on tax exemptions, so when you get this exemption, I remember when we were talking tax exemptions, it was for the 60 years or down the line. There was no way, once we were locked into that, it was pretty long-term, whatever that was.
Yeah, I mean, the affordability is 60 years, so the property needs long-term property tax exemption for it to financially continue hitting the debt service that we talked about. So, you know, because it's regulated for 60 years to do that inordinately low rent, you have to still be able to have the same operating expenses. You know, it bumps about 3% year over year. But if, like, say you give it a year 15, it burns off. And then year 16, you have that big, then you're going to be underwater in the deal. So the long-term affordability and the long-term property.
Yeah,
tax
I get
exemption.
that, but
Yeah,
all right, just again, kind of
it's a good point.
having this general awareness
Yeah.
as you go forward into this thing
Yeah.
and be ready with your discussion points.
And I want to be fully transparent about those things, because the last thing I want is to spend a lot of money and then the deal not go through. That's not, you know,
Right.
That doesn't help anyone.
They don't like that related,
Yeah, I'm sure.
Yeah.
I'm sure.
So-
Well, I'm going to make a transition here, and again, thank you for your time, and again, thank you for all of your work, and I want to have Alyssa, who is sitting in a very sunny place in the gorge, to introduce our consultants from 3J, if you would.
Thank you, Jay. And I loved hearing the conversation from Related. I'm super excited about the project, and I think I learned a lot just from listening to that. So I just wanted to thank Steph and Daniela for coming and laying out how the sausage is made. And speaking of how sausage is made, Steve, sorry. You guys know we've been talking really for a year. A year ago, we were awarded a grant from the Department of Land Conservation and Development to do a housing planning grant, essentially to study our buildable land inventory, our infrastructure related to housing, and the building supply inventory, the housing supply inventory. And we've been promising for months now, oh yes, we're collecting data, we're doing research, we'll get back to you soon and give you some preliminary results. And I'm happy to report that we have Steve and Journey from 3J here today to start rolling out some of the beginnings of the work that we've done, get some ground truth from you. We've had meetings with each of the cities, actually most of the cities, and the county to start looking at the maps. You guys know this is building on that 5-year-old 2019 study that said, wow, we really need to do work on our buildable lands. We need to further understand what's going on. Commissioner Toyoka, I think with the FEMA BIOP, that only puts a finer point on what really is actually buildable land. And you'll see that that is a theme that comes up in this work. So I'm excited to introduce Steve and Journey from 3J, who will basically give us an update on the work of the grant and hopefully get some feedback from you guys. So Steve, I will let you take it from here. Steve, I don't think we can hear you.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Sorry, I think I accidentally unplugged these headphones. And I assume you can see my screen.
Yes.
All right. Well, thank you for the introduction, Alyssa. And as you said, that was an exciting project to hear about, and hopefully this work can lend to more, be a small part of more similar projects in the future. Yeah, we've been working with Alyssa and Jay for months now. I think we presented to you in the spring just to introduce the project, and happy to kind of walk through, remind you of all the kind of components of the project, and also walk through what we've done so far. The purpose of the project is to prepare this shared set of information for all of Clatsop County about land, building, and infrastructure needs. And so the three components of the project are: first, we're preparing buildable land inventories for the county and each of the cities. Second, we are going to be assessing current housing supply. And third, we're looking at infrastructure issues that could potentially affect housing development. This is just a quick diagram. In order to do that, the infrastructure piece, as Alyssa mentioned, we spent some time just collecting data, and that included public facility plans, transportation system plans, capital improvement plans, comprehensive plans, and went through that information for all of the different cities. I will mention that, we kind of anticipated this, but that the information we got out of those documents is somewhat limited. Those documents are really good at talking about system needs, system conditions, and system needs, but they aren't really focused on, and they even talk about growth, like potential growth, but they aren't really focused on where that growth might occur. So I just want to thank everyone that we've met with so far and everyone we will be meeting with, because the meetings with you all are where we really got an idea of what the infrastructure needs are and what things look like on the ground. I think most people are familiar with a buildable lands inventory, but that's basically where we're looking at land supply. We're removing constraints like open water, 100-year floodplain, steep slopes, and in some cases wetlands. We also remove lands that are unsuitable for development, parks, right-of-way, historic sites, things of that nature. And what we're left with is the inventory of buildable land. And then finally, the housing supply assessment. This was a contingency component, but thanks to Brett and DLCD, eventually got the funding for this task. So this task is kind of lagging a little bit behind the other two, but we're basically going to be looking at housing supply and looking at housing supply relative to what we know about household needs and demographics and household needs, with a real focus on affordable housing in underserved populations. So that'll be coming later on. Those are the three main components. So from our kickoff in March to through July, we had our first meeting with you all. We did our data collection. We drafted the buildable land inventories, and we've drafted the infrastructure summaries. Starting in August, we had, as I mentioned, the interviews that we did with city and county staff. Here we are today at task force meeting number 2. In October, we're going to be putting out a countywide survey where we present some of this information. We might call it an online open house, but where we present some of this information and get feedback from the broader community. And at the same time, we'll start drafting those housing supply assessments. In the November-December timeframe, we hopefully will get time with planning commissions in each community. I suppose, Alyssa, that could be a city council or a joint work session depending on the desires of each city. So we'll kind of leave that up to you. And then we'll finalize our reports, kind of pull it all together in the January through March timeframe. And the nice thing is, as I mentioned, at the very minimum, each city is going to walk away with an updated buildable lands inventory, which I think is pretty significant. Yeah. Okay. So walking through the findings, today's presentation, we're really focusing big picture. We got some of the more detailed discussions when we're having our city by city conversations. So our purpose today is really to look at big picture observations and then have some discussion time at the end. I'll mention this again later, but we've shared the draft buildable lands inventories and the draft infrastructure document summaries with all of you. And thank you in advance for reviewing those items and kind of giving us your more specific feedback that way rather than today. Today is more of a big picture discussion. So we'll start with the city of Astoria. Astoria is the one city that we have not had a chance to meet with yet, but I think that's scheduled, right, Journey? Yeah. So that we'll be holding that meeting soon, but just a few observations. Obviously, location is a limiting factor due to being surrounded by rivers and the hilly terrain, and that with land that is landslide prone. And you'll really see that when I show a map in just one moment. Water supply resiliency was identified as very important due to the dependency on a single source and vulnerability to earthquakes. There is a wastewater treatment plant improvement project that will help accommodate the needs of future population growth and growth in the brewery industry. We know there is some redevelopment capacity at places like Tongue Point and Blue Ridge and the Emerald Heights areas. But we also know that I think Blue Ridge in particular, and probably Tongue Point as well, require some pretty significant infrastructure improvements. And then, like we said, we'll be meeting with city staff soon and have more takeaways. So here we are in Astoria, and when you look at the map, the red is slopes of 25% or greater. So right away, you can see how significant that is, not to mention that you've got the being surrounded by the floodplain. So the challenges there are very clear. I mentioned those few environmental constraints that are required to be included in a buildable lands inventory, but on these constraint slides, we also noted kind of other types of constraints that planning, based on local regulations. So that's just a quick note. Here we are with it. This is a quick map of existing land uses. A lot of publicly owned land in Astoria because a lot of it is resource land, I think. And note that much of the land in the southeastern part of the city is in a reserve. And then here's our buildable land inventory. This area here is the Blue Ridge area that we mentioned. This is Emerald Heights. Again, these maps will all be refined through our conversations with each city, but this starts to give you an idea of where potential vacant land might be. But again, a lot of it has limitations due to environmental constraints and infrastructure constraints. All right, Cannon Beach, I think, are our hosts today. A couple notes: growth is really restricted in Cannon Beach. You've got the shoreline to the west and wetlands and steep slopes to the east. Again, you'll see that on the map. There aren't any current infrastructure limitations, which is good. But due to that lack of available land, the city is looking at expanding permitted housing types to address their housing needs. So again, here we are in Cannon Beach. And you can see, I mean, we really, outside of the main stretch of Cannon Beach, there's not a lot of opportunity for housing development. I think the wetlands and the slopes to the east and the shoreline to the west. And there are existing land uses and our buildable land inventory. There might be some potential. We talked about, limited potential east of Highway 101. But there are, all of these kind of vacant and part vacant parcels east of 101 come with their own little caveats and challenges to development. Gearhart, located on mostly flat land with some expansion potential to the north. That development potential is limited by water supply and the fact that the whole city is on septic systems. So finding locations for larger developments especially is really challenging due to the septic. And there is a need to upgrade the water treatment facility and pump stations. Constraints include being in the tsunami inundation zone and wetlands. And I'll also note that the North Coast Land Conservancy has easements on lands in Gearhart, and really a lot in many places throughout the county. I think Jay mentioned when we met yesterday that they're the 4th largest landowner in Warrenton. Jay, was that right?
Something like that, yes.
Yeah. So, that's good to have our land conservancies, but it is another factor in limiting land for housing development. So here we are in Gearhart. And again, not as many slope constraints as we've seen in other communities. And again, there might be some potential for development east of Highway 101, but certainly like in other communities, these constraints and the BIOP, the FEMA BIOP as well, are going to add additional constraints there. Here's a quick land use map, noting the golf course takes up a lot of the city, and Gearhart in particular has a lot of single family residential. And here we are with our buildable lands. Again, we've got some capacity to the north and then potentially to the east. But again, each of those comes with its own challenges. Seaside. Sewer system deficiencies are the real long-term barrier to development in Seaside. Big projects needed. Water supply is also a long-term concern, and there's a need to explore other reliable water sources. There are conservation areas and resource lands and wetlands that are all barriers to development outside expanding outside the urban growth boundary. And we know that the city is considering things like increasing building heights and allowing mixed uses in downtown to address their housing needs. So a quick glance at Seaside. Again, you can see a lot of wetlands to the east. So there are slopes kind of further, like we said, outside the urban growth boundary, but inside, wetlands are a significant barrier. There are our land uses and our buildable land inventory. And finally, we'll go to Warrenton. The wastewater treatment plant needs improvements to address housing needs. And then Warrenton in particular is really impacted by the FEMA BIOP. So here we are looking at constraints. Again, it's kind of like looking at that map of Astoria. It just immediately jumps out, whether it's wetlands or the 100-year floodplain, how much development is restricted in Warrenton. Land use map, and here we are with our buildable land inventory, pretty limited. So that's our kind of quick look at each community, and then some general observation that we want to kind of kick off discussion. So in terms of opportunities, cities are and certainly can consider code updates to allow a greater variety of housing types and potentially increased densities. Focusing on opportunities east of Highway 101 is something we mentioned. Coordinating countywide efforts to seek state infrastructure financing. And identifying redevelopment sites within existing infrastructure, like the presentation we just heard. I mean, that's what we're going to be part of what we're going to be asking the cities to do next is identify those potential redevelopment projects. And I don't think I need to go to through the constraints again, but you can see those at the bottom of the screen. I think we hit that pretty well. So I'll keep the presentation up just in case anyone wants to view a particular map, but looking for just general thoughts and reactions to the information we presented. Does it align with your understanding of your communities? Did we miss anything? Let Jay, if you wouldn't mind kind of leading the discussion there, since I can't see everyone really in the room.
Just a couple of quick comments to add to what you've talked about there. Each of these maps does show the preliminary layout of what we perceive as vacant or potentially developable property. Just for clarification, that doesn't mean that every one of those is a willing seller. We all understand that just because it shows up as potentially development site doesn't mean that the Johnson family is actually going to want to sell it and develop it. And so that's kind of a thing that there's a lot of yellow up in those maps that looks like it could be redeveloped, may or may not be. The other thing that we talked about yesterday is there are some lands outside of the urban area which have the potential for some development. However, those are generally in areas that don't have city sewer and water. A couple of exceptions near Napa and down in Arch Cape and Falcon Cove and stuff. But the the development of significant housing is likely going to have to occur in areas where we have city sewer and water available, just from a density and environmental standpoint. So I think that's an important part of this. The county lands will be reviewed. You'll get a little more of that probably next month, but this information is going back out to all the cities, and there'll be an opportunity for us to hone in and look at this a little more closely. Anything else, Steve, you wanted to add to that, or?
No, I totally forgot to mention that we are doing the same work for the county unincorporated areas as we are for the cities, with a focus on kind of those unincorporated communities. So thanks for mentioning that. And then, yeah, on my next step slide, I'll go over kind of what we're asking city staff to do, but thanks for touching on that.
Yeah. I don't think this group here is gonna wanna spend a great deal of time focusing in on each of the individual maps. I think when you get back to the city staffs, I think that's really where you're gonna probably get the most bang for your buck.
Yeah, Alyssa has something, and then, but that's why today we're just looking for more general observations, thoughts. Did we miss anything from a big picture standpoint? Go ahead, Alyssa.
The only thing I wanted to throw in is just a reminder that part of the reason we're doing this work is because of the state Oregon Housing Needs Analysis law that is going into place, and the rules. Steve and I are working on the rulemaking part of it right now. It's good, and the rules are going to take effect in January of 2025, largely. And so, as we have discussed, the city of Astoria has a large enough population that you will have to meet the state requirements to do a housing capacity analysis and a housing production strategy. The buildable lands inventory is a key part of that. So this is giving you a head start on the work you'll have to undertake in, I think, 2026. But really, this work is intended to inform each city's approach to housing production and responding to the state law around housing needs, right? Clatsop County will be essentially allocated a target for how much housing we are expected to produce. And I think as we look at the maps, as we look at the constraints that we deal with in being a natural resource area, part of the question that we have in front of us is, how are we going to meet our housing needs given the land and infrastructure constraints? And so I think that's the other part of the discussion, not just, do these maps look right? Does this reflect what you know about your city? But sort of, where does that take us in terms of what we want to focus on, whether it's getting infrastructure funding or looking at codes or using publicly owned land. We need to start thinking about how this information helps inform our ultimate housing production goals, which may differ widely from city to city, but also, as we've discussed, is kind of a countywide conversation. So I just wanted to throw that out as part of the discussion to remind us that we're working toward meeting state requirements on this.
Any comments from either online or here? Any response? I think in general, the more we're informed, the better decisions we can obviously make. Each city and county is going to respond to the information differently, and I think we've talked about that as well. But we will have to, as a group, continue to work towards the production of housing. And I'm not exactly sure what those numbers are going to shake out to be, but that's part of our overall process here, is that we have a forum here that we can continue to talk about those things. Steve, do you want to talk a little bit about next steps, or do you have something else you want to add?
Before I get to next steps, I just wanted to mention, in case folks aren't aware, that your neighbors to the south in Tillamook County have legislation was passed that's holding those of the cities in that county, regardless of size, to the same requirements as Astoria is going to have to meet. So that might be something for the smaller cities just to keep an eye on and see how that unfolds. It's interesting. We're working with them on code updates, and I think that's the kind of the low-hanging fruit. But these cities are also going to have to do housing capacity analyses and housing production strategies. And what does that look like for smaller cities that don't have the resource? I mean, there's a reason why it's cities of 10,000 and greater that are required to do these things. So what does that look like for some of these smaller cities that might not have the resources that our slightly larger cities have? So that might just be something that you all want to keep an eye on. Let me share my screen again. And
Brett, do you have anything you want to add?
yeah.
Jay's not here,
Oh,
so I'll
yeah,
call on you, Brett.
yeah, yeah. I was only going to maybe respond a little bit more to what Steve was just saying about Tillamook. What's happening now is we're having the conversations with all the Tillamook County planners because there's actually rulemaking that's having to happen and to implement Senate Bill 406, which applies to Tillamook County. And what is happening there is some conversations whether Tillamook County as a full agency will be doing that work collectively for all of the individual small jurisdictions. Because some of the jurisdictions in Tillamook County are really hovering around several of them around 1,000 people or less, and so that's at least some of the conversations that we're having. I don't have anything more to be able to add. I've been able to take a look at Steve's work and Journey's work along the way on the materials they've been producing, and don't have any specific questions or concerns on that front.
Thanks, Brett. So yeah, it really is a matter of, besides the city by city conversations, getting to what Alyssa said about, okay, so now what do we do? Now what do we do given the constraints that we all know are there? So just quickly in terms of next steps, I mean, there's many next steps, but I laid them out in the schedule earlier. But most importantly, what we're going to be sending a few documents, if we haven't already. I mean, in most cases we have already, but our summary of infrastructure plans. We'd like folks to look at those specifically because, some of them are 5 or more years old, and we don't know what major infrastructure improvements have been completed versus which ones, or if new priorities have emerged. So having you all take a look at that document would be great. It shouldn't be too big of a lift. And then we're sending buildable land inventory maps, a little more detailed because it's we're kind of laying the buildable land inventory over an aerial photograph. It would be great, if you are so inclined, you can use your PDF viewer to mark it up and resend it, or feel free to print out one and do it the old-fashioned way. Get a Sharpie and mark up where you think that the data is not correct. Are we showing things as vacant that aren't, etc. We just did some of that with Jay and Alyssa yesterday, actually. And then does the city have, and I forgot to remove this part, I don't want to put an acreage threshold on it, but like Seaside High School, are there any key redevelopment sites in your community that we want to note on the maps? The early versions of the maps had, there's different ways to identify potential redevelopment, but there's been a lot of talk at the state level about equity and not wanting to show our naturally occurring low income housing as redevelopable, kind of putting a bullseye on it. So instead we're going to kind of do it parcel by parcel and just ask each of you all to say, oh, here are the redevelopment sites in our community. So that's what we'll be doing, or be asking you to do in the coming weeks here. Probably, I mentioned an email today, probably by the end of September-ish, if that works for everyone. And we'll be sending an email out tomorrow or Friday with the documents and with those instructions again. So thank you.
Question.
Yeah.
Question.
So you mentioned a couple minutes ago about getting PDF versions of the maps. Could we also get access to the GIS shape files as well?
I mean, we'll definitely be giving you the shape files when the project is done. That'll be
but what I'm talking about is if we want to go out and ground truth, which is something I can reasonably do, if I have access to that shape file, then I can put that into a, my own GIS and go in and update that project and be able to feed you back any corrected information much more easily.
Okay, let me talk to our GIS manager about what we can do there.
Okay, thanks.
Thanks for the request. Yeah.
And if you compare it to my skill ability, I'm going to go with the Sharpie printed papers. You can go both ways with that,
It's,
so.
you know, we take it all, whatever information we can get, we'll take it.
Okay. Any other suggestions, comments for Steve as he's working and journey through this process? Again, the better the information that we give back to them, the better the information they're gonna be able to get back to us. So please, engage your staff to, be, aggressive on, doing this project. So, anything else, Alyssa?
Well, on that note, I just want to say, even though Jay, you and I are working on this project with 3J, the cities are really our client here, right? This is really to help you guys figure out what you're working with and what opportunities and challenges you have to deal with to produce housing. So if there's any way that this project can be helpful to you, remember that you are the client, and we're happy to make sure that you're getting the results and outcomes from this work that are helpful to you. So just wanted to say that.
Okay. Anything else? Anything else for the good of the order? Anything?
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 It's not raining.
It's not raining yet. All right, so that the power of yet. We are going to declare this meeting done. Thank you for your participation, and again, congrats to Seaside. Keep doing the good work. All right, nice job. Thank you. Yep, absolutely.